Hi, I'm Michael Tolosa. I'm your host of the Layman podcast. And here today I have a couple of guests from Crew, Ethan and Frank, who are doing some fantastic stuff in the Metaverse. So welcome, Ethan and Frank.
Hi, Michael. Hi.
Howdy,
I'm
folks.
Frank.
Yeah, let's start with you, Frank. How did you get involved in this ministry, and what is it? What do you do? Can you give us kind of an overview?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'm really excited about this outreach that Ethan and I and a number of others are a part of. And so I have been interested in some different technologies and how God has been using them to build his kingdom and minister to people in church, outside the church, and that. And actually, it was about 2 years ago I came across a link or an advertisement for an upcoming webinar that was going to be talking about tech and church and some of these spaces, the metaverse and that, and didn't really know as much about VR and that. And so as I was listening to the different, people who were sharing about different aspects of technology and ministry, one gentleman got on somewhere around the middle of the day, and he was somewhat informative about what he was doing. But more of it was his call for all the people listening to join him in what he was doing. And what he was doing was actually ministry in the metaverse. So he went by the name Pastor Brock, and he got on there and said, "This is what I love to do. I go in and share my faith in these 3D worlds, and it's amazing. And I'm meeting people, and I'm, lifting up Christ and blessing people, and you need to come. You need to be a part of this." So it was a little bit different than some of the other webinars. They were a little more informative, a little more academic, and he just got on there and was a call to action: come join me. And I just was struck at that point. I thought, I want to go. I want to join him. So I talked to my wife, and we ended up investing in a headset, VR headset. Probably the next week, I think it's probably about a week after that, and started experimenting, and then, met with Ethan and others who were interested. And so that's where it started for me.
So you invested in this headset, and I assume that's Meta, right? That's Facebook, or not Facebook.
Yeah.
Explain that to me, because I'm
Sure.
not the brands and the different VR worlds that you could possibly join.
So having been in this organization that's largely, does focus on evangelism and sharing our faith, and that I've enjoyed that for many years. I've really been blessed by others around me on different teams and that. But I didn't really know what this was about as much just from hearing from Pastor Brock. I didn't have a lot of information. So I wasn't willing to invest a lot of money and say, I'm going to, buy the most expensive equipment in that. So I looked just a little bit of research and found that Meta had released a model that was called the Meta Quest 2. And I think at that time it was $299 at a local Best Buy. And I was, again, I didn't want to make a huge investment, but I thought, okay, I think I could use this for at least some time and experiment. And so my lovely wife, she said, yeah, let's do it. And so just drove the 10 minutes to get to the Best Buy store and brought it home. Now my son happened to be home at the time. He's a college student and loves tech, and so I actually showed him and say, hey, John, you want to help me out with this? And he's like, yeah. And so he puts it on, and so he started setting it up in my presence. We were both sitting on the couch, and got on, and I think maybe it was the next day, maybe that same night, I was able to have my family around, but I connected it for the very first time and got on and into the metaverse. And I could share more of that story later, but I was connected. It worked. Didn't take much time. And yeah.
So how did you get started, Ethan, in this ministry?
Yeah, honestly, it's a long story. I would say I've been doing this kind of thing even before starting in virtual reality. I've been using my, being a teenager, playing games and meeting people online for the past 10 years, trying to share the gospel with people that I've met from all different countries all over the place. And many of them don't know Jesus because, well, you meet people from all different places, and many of them are hiding in games because that's their escape from reality, because they've got a lot of pain and they've got a lot of things going on. But you can make friends with them and really build a relationship long term, playing games with them over not just days and minutes, but over years, and really build these relationships and make people kind of more open to anything you have to say, and they get to know your personality. So I've been using this for years. I've known way too many people, too many to even keep up every single relationship I've met. So unfortunately, I've had to let some kind of fall off the wayside, which it's unfortunate. But and even now, as we meet people in VR, you can't keep up that relationship with every single person. But anyway, long story short, yes, I've been doing this kind of thing, trying to share the gospel with anyone I meet for a long time. And some of them have been really interesting success stories. Seeing people really have their lives changed as the Lord moves. It's nothing to do with, us individually, but God does really amazing things as he works in people's hearts and kind of draws them back closer to himself, whether they once were with him and then have grown far from him, or whether they never knew him at all. And of course, there's also roller coasters as you go through the years. Sometimes they grow farther again, but God's always moving, and you got to rely on him. As far as how I got into virtual reality specifically, I don't actually remember. God must have orchestrated this meeting, because I never told anyone I did VR, never told anyone I had a headset or anything like that. But somehow I got in contact with Frank, and he was like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about doing this VR ministry." And I'm like, "Hey, I have VR already, and I'm already talking with people about, trying to share the gospel with the people that I know through gaming. That sounds great. Let's do it." And then next thing I knew, every week we were going out into virtual reality and, just street, trying to meet people on the street, more or less. And basically just trying to start a conversation about Jesus, even if it wasn't like a full-on gospel presentation. Hey, would you like to make a decision right now? At least just planting a seed and watering whatever was in the past, and trying to get them just a little bit closer to seeing Jesus as light.
Yeah.
Interesting. So so you say you guys get together. What does that look like? How do you have to be in the same room? I mean, obviously not, but what does that look like? How often do you do this?
We do this every week on our lunch breaks, and it's actually pretty quick to get into virtual reality. We don't have to be in the same room or even in the same country. We've met people from every continent on the planet, because all you have to do is get on the internet, and then you can end up in the same virtual space, join the same lobby, join the same world, depending on which program we're using. We've been usually using VRChat as our main one on Thursdays during lunch. And Frank says it takes him like 2 minutes to boot up his headset and get into the program, and then he's in the world. Me, it takes a little longer because my computer's older, but we just end up in the same world, join up. We pray over what we're going to do and ask the Lord to lead us to the right people, whoever he wants us to talk to that day. And then we head out there just to see who we end up having a conversation with. There's tons of people that we've met, and they all have different stories. So it's a different experience every week.
Yeah. I can add to that. So within Crew, there's a growing interest and a growing movement, even some activities to enter into more of the video game space. And there's a number of people who are working in this now in Crew, and other organizations and churches, and we're connecting. But neither Ethan nor I actually have a full-time job in video game or VR evangelism. So since we're working on some other things, and you and I are on the same team, Michael, and some really great things in the marketing space, we chose to go on a lunch break because we knew that we had that open. And actually through we actually did a social media post on the national Crew media one time, and we came across another guy, friend of ours in Illinois, that he saw, and he's like, "Hey, I want to join." And then his lunch hour was at a certain time, and mine was a little more flexible, and Ethan's. And we said, well, how about we do that on Thursdays? And then another person came, and we're like, hey, lunchtime on Thursdays. And before you know it, most of us are Eastern or Central time in the United States. So yeah, and it just evolved into that. And as Ethan mentioned too, there's a lot of ways that virtual ministry parallels face-to-face physical ministry, but there are definitely some differences. In this case, with going into one space, praying together, and then going out, kind of like 2x2s. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 or 5, but we can actually replicate that pretty well in the metaverse, like you might do in street evangelism. Let's gather at the church, let's pray a little bit, and then we'll just go out and talk with people. And so that's what we're doing right now. So typically on Thursdays, I will add, there have been situations where we meet certain people, certain events, like even our friend from Illinois, he was invited to a special party. And I mean, sometimes we do evenings or weekends or other times of the day, so it's not always just on Thursdays. And we're even looking at how we can maybe connect with more people at more times. So right now, the most consistent thing is Thursday lunchtimes.
So I'm pretty sure you both have experience. Ethan, you were just talking about your experience just playing games in general, just playing general video games and talking to people online and building relationships that way. That's like traditional gaming or video gaming. So how do the two differ? So is it easier to build relationships, talk to people while you're playing Call of Duty or whatever it is you're playing, or in this virtual world?
It's an interesting question because even in the different worlds that you can go to in virtual reality, there's a vast difference in how able you are to kind of build a conversation and relationship with a person, depending on if the person is very distracted trying to do, a shooting game where it takes a lot of their focus, or whether they're, Spider-Man swinging from walls or trying to figure out a new, if the world has a gimmick, if the world has a purpose that you're trying to do, or even if you're just watching a movie, like in a movie world, there's a lot of different things that you can go into a world and there's a distraction or some purpose that is kind of obscuring people being able to just talk with each other and have a focused conversation. So we like to go to the worlds that are more focused on just chatting, and the app that we've been using, VRChat, there's supposedly, I mean, in theory, not as much distraction because rather than being a primarily game focused one, it's mostly the draw is finding other people to talk to and meeting people from all across the world and finding out what their perspectives are. So we try to go to the worlds that cultivate a good chatting kind of conversation. And the same is true for the games that I used to play. If I was playing a game that was like a fast-paced shooter, it's way, way harder to get into any kind of productive conversation than if I was doing something more chill, like a relaxing kind of fishing game or something like that. So really, just it's how much can someone's brain be multitasking in order for you to be able to still get a foot in edgewise.
Yeah. The particular platform that Ethan mentioned that we typically go into is VRChat. We've done some exploring in some other worlds or some other platforms, in particular Roblox, which I'll mention and we can talk about that too. But in VRChat, there's apparently 25,000 community created worlds that are just individuals and groups of people who create these worlds. Not all of them are public, but a big set of them are public. So Ethan and I can scroll and look at different worlds, and some are trending, and we can see how many people are in those worlds. What type of world is it? More, there are like, I don't know, like laser tag and puzzles, and there's one that's like around Halloween, like a horror house thing. I mean, there's all kinds of worlds, but we tend to look for ones. And it seems like a lot of them are very just social. People are just hanging out and talking. And so over time, we've kind of learned, like, we don't want worlds where there's, 100 people in a small space, nor do we go to a world that's like one person in a large space. So we're learning how to do that, but we're finding that we can find some, go to worlds where there's a dozen people and they're just hanging out, talking, spending time there. And so you can just go right up and start conversations.
Nice. And are people more receptive to hearing about the gospel or Christianity or spiritual things in these types of worlds?
Yeah. So I will say, the Lord has blessed me with a number of ministry situations in my past, different places and different kinds of ministry, and there can be some types of ministry where it's really hard to get into a conversation. People are not receptive. I found VRChat crowd is very receptive to discussing spiritual matters. Like a lot of them are just hanging out, and some of the conversations can be toxic and people making fun of others and just like leaving the world. Like there's just a lot of things that are happening. And when we come up, we pray that we're full of the Spirit, and we're trying to be loving and joyful and peaceful and patient and all that, that we can get into spiritual conversations just about every day we've gone. It's not 100%, but I'm guessing 80 to 90% of the Thursdays we go out, we get into a spiritual conversation, which is great. And so not everyone's receptive, but there's quite a few people that hear the authenticity, and we really do a lot of listening. We don't want to just like, hey, do you want to hear about Jesus? I need to tell you right now. And I think they can sense the difference of somebody. We care, we want to listen, we want to pray for people, and we want to share, as God gives us opportunity, the gospel, and invite people to follow Jesus. So I'd say it's been more receptive than a lot of other mission fields I've been a part of.
Yeah, I would imagine that the avatars provide some safety or distance for people, that they can engage in an honest conversation and be more vulnerable if they have that kind of safety. So I imagine it's probably easier to engage in those kinds of conversations in a virtual world than if I were to walk up to somebody on the street in the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're really right, because they always have that freedom to just walk away or turn off the headset. They can escape anytime they want to.
Mm.
So they are, even if they start out the conversation with, yeah, I don't want to talk about that, I don't really have any religious background, you can still kind of go, oh, interesting. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Why is that? And you can kind of, people are still very open. They're very open to sharing. The younger generation seems very hungry for truth. Like they're searching for answers in a world that's given them none. They've been told that they're just, cosmic accidents, and that there's no hope and no point in reality, and they have no purpose. So it seems like a lot of them are just kind of searching. I've compared in the past the VRChat world, and probably, the youth in general are very much like the Greeks that Paul talks about, where they were like always wanting to hear something new, always wanting to hear another perspective, always talking about, different gods that they're sharing with each other. They always want to hear something different. They're searching for truth. They just don't know that the truth is Jesus. So, I mean, it seems like a ripe kind of environment for telling the truth of Jesus, even though they're not necessarily receptive immediately, but at least they're open to hearing, and they do want to hear anything you have to say. It's really interesting that they're like so, open to hearing even something that they don't agree with, because I mean, tolerance is kind of the religion of the day. So even if they're angry with each other, if you show them respect, they'll show you respect in return most of the time.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, we see that a lot. The other thing I will say is that not only are they, looking for truth, and when we go in, again, we really depend on the Lord, and like, fill us, Lord, lead our conversations, lead our ears, our eyes, and all. But when you really give people attention and listen and care, and I think that makes a difference, because they're looking for somebody to attune to them, to show them empathy and compassion. And there's not a lot of that happening in this platform, because we're walking around and we want to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and the ears, and that does, I think people start noticing that, like, these guys come in, they're not just cursing and swearing and complaining about something, and there are literally people who come in, sometimes younger kids, it seems like, based on the voice sounds of their voice, they will just run and scream, and they're just trying to be disruptive, and just horrible things they're saying just because they can get away with it. Just run. There is actually ways in the game where you can actually click, mute them or make them disappear completely in that. But yeah, so as we go around, we really want to strive to be like Christ, full of the Spirit of Christ, and listen and share. And I think that makes a difference in hearing the truth that they're searching for.
This is really like my brain's just going off right now because I'm thinking like, we work in the digital space and we try to figure out what are the best ways to accomplish God's mission on earth through digital spaces. And I just see the benefits of a metaverse like this, where it's kind of like, it's a judgment-free kind of zone where people can explore ideas that they can't in the real world because of cancel culture or whatever. Like they'll just get shut down if you start talking about certain topics, or like that's not allowed. Like you can't think that way. But here with the anonymity and all that, it gives them a safe space to debate ideas, which is like crazy that they have to go to a virtual reality to have that kind of experience. But yeah, I mean, just the digital, that is an advantage of digital. Like we kind of think of like digital as like a lesser version of in person. Like it's got all these like downsides. Like you can't really do. It's better to do it in person or whatever to have that relationship. But digital gives you that separation, that safety, anonymity for people to really explore. Deep ideas.
I'll share just a little story that I heard that I did personally experience, but I believe it is. There was a ministry leader who was also in this metaverse space, and he met somebody who wanted to learn about this VR church, and this particular individual said, can you connect me? I'd like to meet this person. And they said, yeah. So apparently they had a phone call, maybe it was like a Zoom call, and the person on the call, the younger person, just didn't feel as comfortable and just seemed to, I don't know, it just wasn't going very smoothly. And so the ministry leader just kind of noticed like, wow, but eventually connected them in the metaverse, and that person was completely different. With the avatar, they were just so free. They felt so confident. They were expressing themselves so clearly and listening. And the ministry leader just noticed such a difference in their ability in, like a Zoom call versus how they could communicate with their avatar. And that person was like, that was the environment that they felt really good to communicate with. And I believe there's a lot of people with that anonymity, as you mentioned, Michael, and other things, like they just really like their avatar. They're really familiar with the world. Their experience, like very comfortable, and they can share and listen differently than they would in other digital platforms or face-to-face. And so, ultimately we do want to connect people face-to-face, and that's something Ethan and I and our other friends are working on, and we're bringing people to those spaces. But you're right, there's some people that is an environment where they just feel very comfortable, and it's a place to meet them.
I mean, just think about the real world. Like you have Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the anonymity that's the draw there for people to be open.
Yep.
So, I mean, why? I mean, it's an easy translation to go into a virtual world where you have avatars. You are truly anonymous.
Yep.
Like nobody's going to recognize you in the real world, and you can be 100% honest in those environments.
Yeah.
We got to leverage that. I mean, that's where digital is better than reality or in person. Fascinating stuff. So tell me, have you had any experience, like a success story, where you've engaged someone in conversation and it's turned into a repeated like encounters and positive response to the gospel, maybe discipleship actually happening in this virtual world?
So a number of months ago, I think Ethan was there, my other friend Jeff was there. We were a group. It wasn't a huge group, but we had gone out and we were engaging people and listening and sharing. And my friend Jeff and I were on a spaceship world. So we're in like this craft, and it's got like these corridors and rooms. And Jeff and I were in a spot that was a little crowded and a lot of people running and jumping. And so we kind of saw a space off to the side, like, hey, let's kind of wander around that side and see if we can, get in conversation with somebody. So we came to the end of this corridor and around the side, and we saw a woman it looked like the avatar looked female, and Jeff and I just went up and, hey, how are you doing today? And my friend Jeff and I would love to have conversations. We just started talking with her, and we said, actually, by the way, we've come from a church, and we'd love to hear about where people are at in their spiritual journey and how we could maybe help people if they're interested. And she said, church, really? I'm interested in church. And so Jeff and I was like, really? And she said she was in China. She's a Chinese woman in China. And she said, I would like to go to church. And then she was explaining it's not as easy to go to church in China. And we said, well, guess what? There's actually a church here in the metaverse, in this platform in VRChat. And she was happy and excited. And we said, you want to go? And absolutely, if there's a church, that's really convenient. If I could even just, go to church. We said, well, what I can do is we can teleport over to this world, a church world. And she said she's not as familiar with the game. She was a pretty new user. And we said, okay, it'll be pretty easy. We're going to drop a portal, meaning we're going to place this magical door, and it's kind of got these swirling lights, and it looks like a portal. And we said, we're just going to walk right through. So Jeff and I, and you can just follow, or actually maybe you go in first and then I'll follow behind you to make sure you go through. And she said, I can do that. So drop the portal, and Jeff, Frank, and this woman, we'll say Belle, we'll call her Belle, went through the portal. And it takes about 20 seconds, I've counted it for me, to get from one world to another. 20 seconds later, we're in church. And we're there, and there's these seats, and there's these screens where they put scripture and that. And she's like, wow, I didn't imagine it like this. And it still resembles some other worlds in VRChat. She was looking around, and we're like, yeah, well, welcome. And as we were looking at her, so Jeff is there, Belle and I, and we look, and there's a fourth person. And we think, oh, well, welcome. And this person actually was a mute. Now, a mute in the game is somebody who chooses to just type out their answers. There's a little keyboard thing. They can write things and you can read. And so we'll call him Lenny. So Lenny is a mute. And he said, yeah, well, I overheard your conversation and I was curious. Wow. And I went through the portal before it closes, because they only stay open, I think, 30 seconds. So he snuck through the portal, showed up. And so it's four of us. And we're like, well, excellent. Well, great. Well, tell us more about yourself. And then we started getting into a spiritual conversation, and Jeff has some good questions. I think it's called the Quest Survey from Crew. He started saying, if you were to explain, how would you explain your spiritual journey up to this point? And so Lenny wrote, I feel lost. And I remember seeing that, and I was, wow. And just looking at his avatar, it was this kind of parrot, and it just lost, and just the look and it just broke my heart. So we're like, wow, well, thanks for sharing that. And we started talking, and lunch hour was up pretty soon, so we couldn't spend a lot of time. But we got connected. We became friends in there, and there's a way we can connect. And we said, well, it's Thursday. There's no one else here, as you can see, but on the weekend, there is a church service here. If you'd like to come back, we'd love to have you. And he said, yeah, great, I can do that. So that weekend he came back, I met him there. We started introducing him to some people, and then connecting in Discord. So Discord, another platform that we can just ask people, oh, do you use Discord? Almost everybody in VRChat uses Discord. And then you can be having conversation outside of the metaverse, just, texting and calling, you can do whatever. So we kept in touch, and we learned that he was a university student in Wisconsin. And at a Whitewater, so it wasn't the main campus in Wisconsin. And so Jeff said, well, I think we have a Crew movement there. Would you like to, learn more? And we'd been having spiritual conversations, and he said, I would. So we actually connected him to the local movement there, and through Discord with another student who's a Discord. And so they were able to connect there. And he was walking the next day or something, and saw a sidewalk, come to our Crew meeting, 7:00 on Wednesdays or something. And he took a picture and was excited and sent me it, yeah, look here, I saw this and I really want to go. I have classes at that time. I won't be able to make it. I said, oh, well, no problem. So Jeff and I, just sometimes in the game, introducing him more church and fellowship. He came to a campfire, we could say it's actually a church campfire world. And he just said, this feels like real community.
Wow.
And so he's noticing. And so again, relationship, connecting. We would start, Thursdays we're going to share our faith. He sees us, he comes join us. And we said, well, just as we met you, you want to come? He's like, yeah. So he expressed that in his younger years, he had gone to a church and he just was having trouble with science and faith. Like he trusts in science, but he's really open more, and he comes with us and sees us talk to other people about Jesus, and it starts making an impression on him. So he's more and more interested, and unfortunately he had to go to the hospital. He was hospitalized a number of months after that. And in the hospital, a chaplain came around and offered him a New Testament. And I think it was the whole Bible. Yeah. So offered him a Bible, and he decided to take it. And then he started reading it. And then he wrote me a text in Discord and said, Frank, I'm a Christian.
Oh, wow.
And so this is a number of months, and, in the game, outside of the game, and the chaplain and that. And I was so excited, and I was like, oh, that's wonderful. Tell me more. How did that, it's like, when we first met, it kind of seemed like you weren't a Christian, where you say that you weren't and now you are. He says, well, I know that I've always had doubts, but I'm definitely a Christian.
Wow.
And so, yeah. And so it's really cool because now he's connected there to the Crew movement through Discord, locally, the people around him. And yeah, so that's one thing we want to, meet people in virtual space and then get them connected to real people around them. So that's a fun story how God did that. And it's still ongoing. Like I wrote him not too long ago, and just, we're hoping to, he starts connecting more and going to meetings and growing in that. But that's cool how God did that.
That's an amazing story. And just think, again, my mind is in digital. So how many digital tools were involved in that chain?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Meta, you've got this VR world thing. And I don't really understand the difference between the hardware and the software. So maybe you can explain that. But then you've got Discord involved. You've got, and then you have offline, so at some point, it's just amazing that it's not like one tool that's going to solve everything, but it's working in conjunction with other tools that people are already there and already using. It's not like it's not like create something and they will come. It's like go to where they are and use the tools.
Go to where they are. Amen.
Can you just explain quickly, like, the difference between the hardware? Like, so somebody who wants to get into this, what do they need to do? Like, they got to purchase hardware, but which hardware? Like, then there's the actual world. Can you go to use different platforms, like instead of VR world or whatever it is called, with the same hardware? Like, how does all that work? Or is the hardware tied to the software?
It depends, because there are some platforms which are probably platform specific. I know Meta's got their own little metaverse thing going on, which I'm not sure is accessible by other VR platforms, but I think the majority of the places you can go would be available on the majority of VR systems. You would just need to, download the right program, plug in the right wires. So it's a little bit of a complicated question that can't really just be answered with here's how it works. Everything requires just a little bit of research, I would say. But the vast majority of headsets that are out there, even mine's like one of the original systems that existed. I'm still using it. I just plug it into my computer and I use Steam VR to connect to VRChat, whereas Frank's using an entirely different method through Meta's, Oculus Quest 2 or whatever it's called, to get into the same platform through a different means, through the Oculus Quest store. So both of those are completely different mediums to get into the same VRChat program, which is connecting all these different users across the world. So, I mean, same is probably true of Big Screen or Rec Room or all these different other VR gathering places where people can get into. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Is VRChat, is that the biggest one? Is that the main one?
I actually don't know which one is the biggest. I would, just out of my ignorance, might say so. It feels like there are a lot of people there and it gets the most press sometimes, but that might be infamy as well due to all the chaos that happens sometimes in there. there's both light and darkness, just like the real world. Every place has good things and bad things that happen in it, and because there's people there, yeah, there's some weird stuff that happens sometimes. So
I want to add, Ethan right here actually put together a little, not a little, actually quite lengthy, comprehensive document of exactly how you can get into VRChat. Okay, go here, click on this, sign up with this name. It's all free, by the way. And then, go here, and then you can. So he's actually got a document that we've been circulating and adding some, like most of it's come from him, but a few of us have added some things. So some of it's the technical, and then some of it's a little bit like, okay, once you're in, here's some tips, some thoughts, some things to think about when you're walking around, when you're talking. And so that's wonderful. Too, the other thing about the world, so I used to think that VRChat was the largest one. It seems pretty large. And we meet, I mean, a lot of young people, but all kinds of, but I was just looking it up just before this recording. And from one website that wrote up something in March, but they updated it in November. So it's pretty recent. They said there's more than 600 million active users in the metaverse. The most popular platform is called Roblox. Now, a lot of parents that are listening to this would probably like, yeah, Roblox, my kid loves Roblox. Not everybody goes onto Roblox with a VR headset, but that's got 55 million active users, whereas VRChat has 9.4 million, but not all 9.4 million are at the same time. At any given time, there's usually about 30,000. Like, you go in, that's a pretty average. 30,000 people are right on that instance there. So when we go out, there's potentially 30,000 people that we can interact with. Again, not all of them are in public world. Some are in private spaces. But those are just a few of those numbers. Is in Roblox. I went in with my friend in Roblox. I was with my headset, and he was with his in two different, physical rooms. But he was a guide for me going around. And wow, there was a lot of people there. So those are just some of the things. But yeah, Ethan does have some documentation on helping people get connected. And all the platforms we've talked about are all free. Rec Room, there's spatial.io, there's, big screen, VRChat, Roblox. They're all free. And if you have a headset, there's a way to connect you.
Even if you're worried that you can't possibly participate with this ministry, but you have interest in it, if you want to try it out and you don't have a headset, you can also get in without a headset. If you just have a PC computer, Windows computer, it doesn't work on Mac, I don't think, but if you have a PC, you can log in and make an account for free and just use your keyboard to control yourself and walk around the same world and interact with the same people who you would see if you were in virtual reality. You can talk to those same people using just your computer. So that's a free way to check it out if you want to see if the ministry works for you, if you have any interest in participating even without a headset.
Okay.
And mobile. Rec Room is on mobile. I was kind of tinkering with that some. And VRChat is developing a mobile platform. Yeah, they're working on that. I don't know if it's in beta or if it's out yet, but
yeah, VRChat's out.
So VRChat is like the Netflix app. You can install it on different hardware. So you can engage with it on an iPhone, you can engage with it on Android, you can do it on your Roku or your Apple TV or Smart TV desktop. Unfortunately, but the difference is you can't use your Mac, and that's
no, yeah.
Mac
user, yeah.
So if you are interested in this document that they're talking about, just email me at laymanpodcast@yahoo.com, and I can connect you with that document. The metaverse, is that just a term like internet? Is it just a general term, or is that specific to Meta? Is there a connection there? Or
I think it's both, honestly. It's like how Kleenex has become the generic term for all tissue paper. The metaverse originally was a term written in like a dystopian sci-fi kind of book about, the world could be so weird if virtual takes over reality. But then Facebook decided that they wanted to actually make it into a real thing. So now there's actually a place called the metaverse, but virtual reality is an overall kind of overarching group that includes the metaverse as Facebook's individual thing. but some people just use the metaverse, in the same generic way to refer to the overall concept of a virtual kind of space. And that includes a lot more different places than just the metaverse. So yes, it's both a specific one and the general, depending on how you're using the term.
Okay. When you first started this ministry, did you explore first like building your own world and then trying to get people to it? Or was your strategy like, that's not going to work, I'm just going to go to where people are?
So no, we have not made a world of our own yet to try to get people to come in, because there are so many other worlds out there already that people are in. And we could make a world like where I think there's several projects in the works trying to make a solarium world. Obviously there's projects trying to make the Jesus film worlds where people can explore the scenes from the animated story of Jesus, which will be really cool. Those are in the works for the future. But at the moment, there already are church worlds that we can invite people to. There are lots of places you can just say, hey, why don't you go to a quieter spot to talk? But people will kind of end up in whatever world they end up, and without a reason to go to a world, that world might not become popular. So if you just have a world there, nobody might happen to go to it unless you go out to where people are and talk with them first and maybe invite them to it. So we haven't really tried that strategy yet.
Yeah, I like how we're using existing technology. We're using worlds that already exist, and we're bringing people to them. I guess that's somewhat you vet these areas. Like we know that we trust this space, so we're going to bring people to this space.
And there was a time earlier we were kind of informally partnering with a particular virtual reality church that had a presence in VRChat, and some really wonderful people, and we haven't connected with them as much recently, but I asked their leadership, can we bring people, because we're mainly going out to share our faith and see what God does as we share the gospel and listen and pray. And they were like, yeah, we should be doing it too. And then I invited one of the pastors to come with us, and this pastor came. And so we don't have a world of our own, but we want to set it in the larger context. And actually several of us last summer did a church planting cohort kind of experimental kind of, not training, but had some discussions of what it would look like to plant a church there in conjunction with Jesus Film and that. And so we want to set it in the bigger context where people can connect and not just we're going out and sharing our faith. Where's more of a hub to bring people and form community, because that's where we really want to see the Lord work in the body of Christ and not, 2 by 2 only. So it's still a work in progress. We have, dream and aspirations, and Ethan and I were talking, he came up, with some good ideas of just even thinking about prayer support and how we can keep people connected. But right now it's mainly evangelism, and then through Discord, ongoing relationships, some more than others. And Ethan mentioned we have a hard time keeping up with everybody we meet. But that's what we're primarily focused on now. Meeting people, listening, sharing, and connecting in Discord afterwards. Yeah.
And if you're listening to this and you want to try this out yourself, and you want to maybe hook up with these guys in the VR chat, just send me an email and I'll connect you. Again, laymanpodcast@yahoo.com. Just real quick before we end, both Ethan and I are like salary staff at Crew. We get a salary just like a normal job. But Frank, you are a missionary, and that's kind of the majority of people who work at Crew raise their own support like missionaries.
Thanks for mentioning that, Michael. So it's been a privilege. It really has been of having ministry partners, those who pray, those who encourage, so those who financially support us in different ways. People are a part of our work, and this is my 24th year with Crew, and so and if you're interested in being involved in some way, and maybe you're not quite sure you yourself want to jump in and start sharing Christ in there, I'd love to talk with you about ways that we can partner. And actually, Michael is going to put in the notes at the end of the chat a way that you can get in touch to learn about that. But we know that we can only do this in partnership. We partner with individuals, with churches. Crew partners with a lot of other organizations and churches, and really it's the body of Christ doing this, even though everybody doesn't have the same role. And I love going in, so I'm happy to go in. But if you're wanting to be involved in some other way that's not actually going in, I'd love to talk with you, and you can be a part of that.
Yeah, and I'll have a link in the notes for Frank's support page. So go check it out.
Thank you. That would be great. But I really want you to encourage whoever's listening to this, like, it's been an amazing ride for Ethan and I and our friends, and we're more people coming, and it's just amazing. And so really, if you want to try it, we've had friends. I had a friend who said, I'll come in. I said, you can just stand and watch. And that's all he did, just put on his headset and just watch. You know, you don't have to do anything if you want to try it. So I really want to encourage you, just as I heard that webinar, like, come join me. Please consider, pray and think about it. And Ethan or I or somebody else can help you get connected and try it.
Yeah, and that anonymity works both ways. So,
Right.
you know, it's a lot easier to learn how to do, you know, street evangelism in a virtual world than it would be out in public. So, and you still engage in the same, you engage people and you have the same kinds of conversations, but it feels safer for you, it feels safer for them. It's a wonderful platform to do evangelism. So, well, thank you both for participating in this podcast. Thank you for your insights and the work that you're doing every Thursday at lunchtime. They'll be in the metaverse, so pray for them. And yeah, we just thank you, appreciate the time and the work that you're doing for Jesus.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Ethan.
Thanks for having us. It's been great.